So the question is, what is the likelihood that Jesus walked right here in this space, that he was standing in the very spot that we're standing in right now? And he said the answer is 100%. And not just Jesus, the disciples. Hey, Castleview, thank you for being back again at this week's episode of the podcast. And this week's a little bit different. I, of course, just had a 10-day trip to Israel, and very interesting experience, just an amazing, people say it's life-changing. People say that, you see the Bible in color after you've been there, and all of that is true. And this week we had a chance to go with an organization called the Joshua Fund. And they got about 20 pastors or so from the U.S., and it really was a solidarity trip. And we were going to stand with Israel. They wanted evangelical pastors to go and see what was going on over there, and for us to see it ourselves and be able to come back and guide our churches in praying for them and standing with them. So really interesting. I'll tell you a little bit more about it as we go on, but I've got a guest with us today, and we're just going to kind of bounce back and forth about Israel. Drew, good to have you today. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So
I know you're going to turn the tables a little bit today and ask me some questions,
right.
But you were there.
Right.
You've been to Israel before. Tell me, when were you there? What was your experience?
Yeah, so my grandfather had a ministry there for a number of years, and that was my connection, my inroad. So I got done with my ministry at West Coast, where I was at for a couple years. Mm-hmm. Then I spent 6 weeks. I lived 6 weeks in Israel on a kibbutz called Tel Katsir.
Did they have was the kibbutz that you were at? We were at one. Did it have the buffet, what's it called? The cafeteria kind of a situation?
Yeah, a bit. Yeah, kibbutzes are interesting. I think we should talk about that. Yeah. But yes, it had all those things, and each kibbutz is a little bit different, like whether it's agriculture or sometimes they have some manufacturing stuff. They're a little bit different. A lot of them do agriculture stuff. Mm-hmm. But basically they're and we could talk more about this, but they're like communities. Yes. That's what they are. So like a neighborhood. It's a neighborhood. But it's a little bit different than our idea of a community, because you have like a centralized location you could eat at. You don't have to, but a lot of people know each other. It's kind of like a gated community a bit. Mm-hmm. And then typically they do some sort of industry, whether that's farming, manufacturing, or something like that. They work
together well. They work together. Whenever I heard kibbutz before, because I'm thinking Israel, ancient times, all of that, I think I'm thinking a tent. You know what I mean? I'm kind of envisioning these tents, because your dad sometimes will talk about his time on a kibbutz. You've talked about time on a kibbutz. And so I kind of, it was different than I thought. It was like a neighborhood. There's houses in it, but a little more central. They do life together. They've got the cafeteria.
It's very cool.
Yeah, really interesting.
Yeah, so I was there for 6 weeks, and I think that was probably the best part of the experience, that you're not just there for the tourism, although I was able to go see all the sites and everything. And this would have been my second time there, actually. I was there when I was 12 with my family and did all the touristy things. But this time, I was able to sort of live among the people and get to know Israelis. See, that's like the interesting part, is like knowing Israelis, making friends with them. Like we played Settlers of Catan one time, like a board game, just hanging out and doing a lot of fun, making friends with them. So that was really a unique experience. And so I want to ask you some questions about your experience there. This was your first time going?
Yes.
Okay, so you mentioned that it was through something called the Joshua Project.
Joshua Fund.
Joshua Fund, okay.
That's right.
So tell me about how that connect, like what is the Joshua Fund?
Sure.
And then why did you get picked for the team? Why did you get selected?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked it, because I wanted to mention it. So it started with it. Let me tell you who the Joshua Fund is and how I got connected with them. The Joshua Fund is led by Joel Rosenberg. Have you heard his name? Do you know who that is?
No.
Okay, he is
Joel Osteen, pretty close.
No, totally different. Good theology with Joel Rosenberg. He's actually an author. He's written, I think, 16 novels.
Yeah.
Very interesting. The first novel he wrote, so his novels are about, they're fiction, but the first one he wrote is called The Last Jihad. The first chapter opens, it's the President of the United States coming into back to Colorado because the former governor of Colorado had just been elected as the president. Again, fiction, right?
Yeah,
This is
okay.
happening. So but they're coming into DIA. They're driving on I-70. They've got this ambush situation. There was an explosion. First chapter that is heard all the way down to Castle Rock. He says in the first chapter of the book. Really interesting. So anyway, New York Times bestseller. But he
should be a Netflix series now.
It should be, right. I mean, he's been able. He's on CNN. He's on Fox News.
Yeah.
They use him. He's a contributor on a lot of things. Very, very intelligent man. He's Jewish, but he's a converted. He's a messianic. He's a born again believer.
Yeah.
And his ministry now, he and his wife both have a great heart for the Jews that are there.
Yeah.
And not just the Jews, their neighbors, Syria and Lebanon. And, even those that would be attacking Israel. They look at the scriptures and say, Jesus said we're supposed to love and so they've got this ministry that they're working with pastors, local pastors there. They encourage them. But part of the facet is we want as many American pastors to understand what's going on here so that you can be involved, you can pray, and you know what's going on. Okay, so he's connected with Chad Conley. We've had Chad at our church. Chad is more of a political guy, born-again believer, great Christian, teaches Sunday school at his church. Very involved. He's got a great story. Chad and I have become good friends. We've known each other about 10 years or so. And Chad was actually tapped by Reince Priebus, who was Trump's chief of staff for a little while in 2016, to get across America and get the evangelical, the Christian vote. Go to churches, and we don't know how to do it, but we believe we need to rally this base, and you're the guy to do it. So, he lived his life on a plane that year. A lot of people actually credited Chad for a lot of the success that Trump had in that 2016 election. Mm-hmm. And so Chad and Joel have this relationship, and they're both burdened for, yes, America, yes, Israel. And so Joel said, let's put this trip together. Yep. Chad, you get to handpick who you want to come. And so out of these 20 pastors,
all-star team.
I don't know all-stars, but really a great group of individuals.
So all pastors, their spouses.
Pastors along with their spouses. Yeah, so there was about 40 of us that ended up going on this trip.
How many of your group was it their first time there?
Great question. The majority of us. It's interesting because I would say maybe 3/4 first time there.
Good.
Maybe even a little bit more than that. Yeah. And then we had a couple of outliers. Tim Butler's a pastor in North Carolina. He's been there 15 times.
Wow.
And so he's an older. He's
a veteran then.
He's a veteran. That'd be a better way to put it. He'd pull me aside sometimes and hey, this is over here and that's over there. And
show you the secret passageways.
Yeah, he's been there quite a bit.
Yeah.
And then I sat on the bus next to a guy, Pastor Jim Scudder from Quentin Road Baptist Church. He's been there 26 times. And very interested in it. He knew all kinds of things. He's the one that brought the TV broadcast crew that
video
we did on
that
the podcast last week.
Yeah.
Yes,
right.
And so that was Jim. So most of us first time.
From your first time seeing it,
or
just being there, what was the first thing that stood out to you? Like, wow, I'm in the Middle East, or I'm in Israel, or this stood out to you?
Yeah.
Because immediately when you get asked to something like that, you're thinking all the biblical sites. But this is a country, a modern country that is, a lot of warfare, a lot of conflict, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And so you're getting a lot of different history immediately. What was the first thing that you stood out to you?
It's funny because people would ask on Sunday, hey, how was it? And it's kind of like, I don't know how to stop and just summarize, right? And that's part of the reason for this podcast is we can have a little bit of a longer form of let me tell you a few things about what I experienced, because it's almost like, okay, we experience so many things and it takes you a while to absorb it.
Yeah.
Right? Listen, we go to a hotel and it's on the Sea of Galilee. And so we walk into this hotel. It's called the Magdala Guest House. And there's glass all on one side of it that right outside is an archaeological dig there, right? And so, a lot of history. You're walking in, and right away you see this dig, and you go over, and our guide starts telling us what it is. when they got ready to build this this hotel in Israel, of course, you've got people that live there. And so you just can't build anywhere, but you also have to respect what people are doing. They've got livelihood and all of that. So they go through this process to check and make sure there's nothing on the site. Well, sure enough, they start discovering that there was something here.
Yeah.
And what they've discovered is it was a synagogue that was right there on the site the hotel was going to be. So they just kind of slid the hotel over a little bit, and they enclosed that in glass. So you walk in the lobby and you look out, and you've got this synagogue. And the New Testament says, and by the way, this is you're right at the Sea of Galilee. You've got Caesarea behind you. Capernaum is just up the road. The Bible says that Jesus taught in all of the synagogues in that region. And so one of our first experiences, you walk in and you're looking at this synagogue and you're going, and they're not saying we know 100% that he was here, but the Bible says he taught in the synagogues in this area.
When was that synagogue dated? Do you know?
Oh boy! I don't know what the date of it was.
Yeah.
It was all the way back. They believe the time of Jesus,
yeah.
right, is when that synagogue was there. So it was just
stuff like that is really interesting.
It's hard to absorb all of that. We went to Caesarea, and this was a cool experience. They had asked several of us, probably 5, 6 of us pastors, to preach at different locations. And so the very first day, we're at Caesarea. That's where King Herod's palace was. They've got an amphitheater right there. Paul was there, and I got to preach 7 minutes. Right? I mean, we're not long messages, but I got to stand in the amphitheater and actually speak to those pastors and talk about. Remember Agabus? He comes in, and the Holy Spirit tells him. He tells Paul, "Hey, if you go to Jerusalem, you're gonna get bound." He takes his belt, takes Paul's belt, and he binds himself and says the owner of this belt is going to be bound in Jerusalem. And he's not saying the Spirit's saying don't go. He's just saying this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then all the friends get around and say, Paul, don't go. You can't do this. They get emotional, and Paul says, "You're breaking my heart. You're breaking my. This is what God's called me to do. I have to go." And so it's just really an emotional place, even to be able to stand and preach in a place that Paul would have been.
And it's so well preserved too.
Oh.
Like there's different places that you see archaeologically that are more. It's kind of just at the ground level, and you can see some of the stubs. But Caesarea has like columns and the amphitheater, so it's a lot. There's a lot there. You can feel the history. It feels very Romanesque a little bit. Yeah.
So they take us down to you're at the amphitheater, and right next to it, right on the coast there, is King Herod's, the remains of King Herod's palace, and they're pretty well gone now.
Yeah.
But they're showing you right up to that there's a pool right there that was ocean, that there was water fed from the sea there. So it's you've got this pool that was at the back of his house, and the tile, you see the tile that was there during King Herod's reign, and it's authentic to that day.
Yeah.
And they just discovered, this was kind of a new thing too, Paul was there, the Bible says, 5 days in a holding cell. And so they take us down into a recently discovered, right on the side of Herod's palace, this holding cell. And so we walk into this place. This is my first experience. I just preached, then they the first day, just preached. They take us down into this. We get to see where King Herod's palace was at. We go down in this holding cell, and they start to talk to us about, hey, Paul was here. It's about 20 feet deep and about 8 feet wide. Yeah. And the stones are original to that day. Like literally, you're trying to process this, that I am touching stones that the Apostle Paul would have touched in that day. Yeah. And I think those were some of the coolest experiences in the places that you knew they were here in this. Because some of them are like, we this general area, this general place. Yeah. But when you knew somebody biblical was in that place, it was pretty powerful.
Right. I think another thing that stood out to me, just for being there like the first time, was how beautiful the Sea of Galilee was and the area. Because there's so many sights to see, and that's what you're thinking about. That's your to-do list. Yeah. But just to like be there, and you're like, well, truly, this is kind of like the land flowing with milk and honey. There is a beauty to it. It definitely reminds me a lot of California, which I know probably for most people hearing that, it's like, oh, I don't like California, but the state itself is beautiful. But Israel likens itself a lot, that Mediterranean vibe.
Yes.
It looks beautiful. Did anything like that, just where you were staying, kind of stand out to you?
Yeah, I was, so the Magdala guest house where that synagogue was at is right on the Sea of Galilee, right? So I woke up, your schedule's off when you're there. I mean, it's 9 hours behind us. And so your schedule's off quite a bit. And so one morning I woke up at 3:30 in the morning. I can't go back to sleep. I'm awake at that point. And so about 4 o'clock, I just go out with my Bible and sit on the Sea of Galilee. You're sitting on the shore.
Yeah.
And I'm reading through Mark 4, Mark 5, Mark 6. And you're just reading about Jesus calls Peter and Andrew right here, and James and John right here. And you're looking out at this sea, and this is where Peter walks on water, right?
Did you give it a shot?
So I didn't try. No, I didn't.
No storms brewing.
This is interesting. So now that you say that, we went on a boat ride. Did you go on a boat?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to, right? I mean,
did you go swimming in the sea?
I did not go swimming in the sea.
See, that's a lot of fun too.
Yeah. If we had gone to the Dead Sea, I think I would have gotten in, because you float.
Yeah, you wouldn't have gone in too far because you just start floating.
I wouldn't have submerged much.
Yeah.
We got on a boat on the Sea of Galilee, and what was interesting, you're on this boat and you're right. It's beautiful. I mean, you've got
it's pretty
the hills all around that entire lake right there, and just to try to still your mind and picture that this is the place, right? So when we get on this boat, it's calm. We're kind of enjoying the fellowship and the tour and with the guide and what they're telling us, and about halfway through, I mean, out of nowhere, it's like this little storm, comes up. And it wasn't like we're in danger. It wasn't that big of a storm, but the water's choppy, and you could just see how quickly that could happen.
And in a first century boat too. By the way, did you see some of the boats?
I did.
They had some reconstruction, or not reconstruction, like some they had found somewhere around the Sea of Galilee. There's like this construction of like a first century or a couple 1,000-year-old fishing boat. Obviously, it's not Peter's or anything like that. But the idea, you can see what it visualized, and maybe it wasn't the fishing boat, but just to see what those boats were like. So obviously, we're in a little bit bigger vessel these days. You feel a little bit safer,
much more stable.
So you could visualize that. I'm sure that's surreal. Feeling that.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was surreal. I think that people ask me, okay, what was your favorite part? Of the whole trip? And there were several that were highlights. One of the things I think that stood out, though, was whenever you were at a place that you knew somebody was at, not even just the region, right? But okay, we go to the Garden Tomb and Golgotha. And that was pretty amazing. Mm-hmm. You sit there, and by the way, Golgotha is very. Did you go there when you were there? Remember the bus stop that's down there? Golgotha was not what I expected at all. When the Muslims were there, they are still there, obviously, but they put a bus stop at the bottom of Golgotha, kind of almost even spiting Christianity. That hey, we're going to take this holy site, this place that this happened, and kind of desecrate it, even with something like this. And so you're there, you're seeing that. You go to the Garden Tomb, and it's pretty amazing. I mean, just to be in what they believe to be the site that Jesus was buried. And they have the tour guide, and he gives you all the reasons why they think this is the place. And to walk into that tomb is a bit of a surreal moment. You walk out, of course, we saw Golgotha over there. It's all in that area. But it was interesting because there's a few places that you think to yourself, this likely is the place.
Yeah, was this a spot?
Was it the spot? They think there's a place right down the road that could have been the spot. And so I'm going to say it in the wrong way. I don't mean to say it this way. It kind of downgrades some of those experiences.
There's a little bit of a doubt.
A little bit of a doubt that, we think so.
But it's good for business. So.
Right. We want you to, we want you. And, so...
You don't know. But,
so the places though that okay, so we go on this.
Was there ever a spot that was more definite, more?
Yeah. So later in that day, they take us to what is is just now being uncovered. Matter of fact, it's over the last, I think they discovered this. They had a sewer leak in like 2006, and they've got to go under the city. By the way, somebody asked me, well, how come everything's, below?
That's interesting.
Yeah, obviously dust, erosion, time. I mean, this is a couple thousand years ago when Jesus was here. But you also had the Romans come in and destroy so much of what was there and build on top of what was there already. They wouldn't
remove it. They would just build on top of it.
Build on top of it.
There's a spot that I remember just a random, like there's souvenir shops. You're just down this alley street and there's this plexiglass and you can look down and there's 10 feet down and like that's where King David's, city like in Jerusalem was.
Yes.
Like it was so, they would just keep building on top of it.
We were there.
Yeah.
So the guide that took us through there showed us they found in that place seals that were not, sometimes you had wax seals and then sometimes you had clay seals. Well, these clay seals survived. You had the Romans come in, they overthrew everything, they burned the whole place. Well, clay seals are fine in fire. One of them was from Hezekiah and one of them was from Isaiah. I mean, you see these things in person, and it blows your mind that this happened in this place.
Yeah.
So they take us just down the way from that, and you're walking. It in Jesus' day, it would have been open air. But we're walking in tunnels now, right?
Okay.
They've excavated this out in 2006. They had a sewer leak underneath this city, that's above all of this. And when they go down there and they start doing all of this work on the sewer line, they discover, what is this? This seems like, this is some kind of road, kind of thing. So they kind of start. And by the way, this is interesting too, because the guy did tell us this is a bustling city. In the U.S., this all would be eminent domain. But you'll notice there's houses right here that people are living in right next to this spot. They don't just tell people they have to leave. They would have to upheave the whole place. I mean, there's so many things that have happened there. And so anyway, it's underground. You're walking down this highway.
Okay.
And they've got, I don't know how long it is now. Maybe it's a half a mile now. And you're underground and you're walking and the steps would be staggered, right? So you've got 3 feet a step, 7 feet a step, 4 feet a step. And so they're kind of staggered all the way down. We stop at this little place that had these little steps and then a platform. And the guide's telling us this would be the place that if you had a message, you would speak your message here at this location. But I'll get back to that in a minute. So you're going all the way down. They follow this down, and they discover the Pool of Siloam is down at the bottom of it. Okay. Well, that's the place that you'd go cleanse ceremoniously before you'd go to the temple. And then the Bible talks about this pilgrimage road that takes you up to the temple. So they've not gotten all the way to the temple yet, but they know it's going to end there, right? I mean, everything that the New Testament talks about, the Old Testament prophecies, all of these things, the law, all these things are exactly as. So we're standing there. I've got this little video, and the tour guide is talking about what this highway and the ceremonies cleansing and the walk to the temple, and he says, so the question is, what is the likelihood that Jesus walked right here in this space, that he was standing in the very spot that we're standing in right now? And he said the answer is 100%. And not just Jesus, the disciples. All of the Jews that lived during that time period, that we're going from the Pool of Siloam all the way up to, obviously, the temple. They would have walked right there in those very spots that we were at. That was a cool moment.
Yeah. Just like, was there ever, even in that place or at all in Israel, like a really emotional moment for you, where it just got to you, Garden Tomb or places like that, that really stood out?
Yeah, I think I don't think there was a place that I think you're just taking it in, right?
It's hard to process it so quickly.
You would go back to the hotel room at night and just kind of, because the guide is giving you so much now you're blown away. Don't get me wrong. I'm standing there. I'm blown away. They're showing us pottery that was revolt ware that the Jews when they're hiding underneath this pilgrimage road, and the Romans come in and discover there's a couple thousand Jews down there. They burn this place. There's stories that you're blown away by. Wow, that's exactly what the Bible said happened.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you for instance. We're in the city of David, which one of the things that surprised me was the close proximity of everything. Mm. Did you go to the Mount of Olives when you were there?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're standing on the Mount of Olives.
Everything is so close. You don't have to get in the car and drive a half hour. Where's the garden?
It's
right there.
You look down and see the Garden of Gethsemane. You look across and there's a Temple Mount. You look over here, you see Caiaphas' house where Jesus is judged. You've got all these things right in front of you. And so we're at the old city of David. This is before the Temple Mount. Of course, Solomon came in and built the temple up higher. And they found this rock that's got a hole hewn out in the rock, and they archaeologists know what they're using this for. It's a toilet, is what it is. This is 2,500 years ago. This is during the time of David and way back, right? 2,500 years ago.
The toilets were pretty well made then. Huh?
It was pretty impressive, to be honest. But you're looking at it, right? They've got this rock, and it's got this hole hewn out in it, and so they wanted to know, what were these people eating? Okay, this is 2,500 years ago.
Yeah.
And so he said there's one person in the world in the U.S. that can do the DNA required to be able to figure out the contents in their stomachs, which, I'm just sitting there. Yeah. I don't understand all that, right? I mean, I don't understand all that, how that works. But he said what they discovered was they were eating raw meat and weeds. They found, and the reason they discovered that is because of the contents, also the parasites and tapeworms and those kind of things that were involved. Well, the Bible says when they came in to overthrow that city, they walled them off. The people were starving. I mean, it went to raw meat, anything that they could get their hands on, potentially even cannibalism or people that had died, whatever they had to do, and weeds. And you're hearing stuff like that, and you're just going, wait a minute. The Bible talks about all of that, all of these years ago, and then a DNA expert comes in. Hey, what's in what's in this toilet? Well, they were eating raw meat and they were eating weeds. Those kind of things blew my mind while I was there.
Yeah, that's great. Did the Garden of Gethsemane, was that really interesting?
Didn't get to go to it.
Didn't get. Okay.
Yeah, we could see it from way down. We had 10 days there. We didn't get to go to the Jordan River. We didn't go to the Dead Sea. We didn't go to the Valley of Elah. I'm sure there's
not much in the Valley of Elah.
Yeah, no, and that's what I heard too. That if you're going to miss something, that might be the thing.
And then
the
Jordan River is right connected to the Sea of Galilee. But I know people. People get baptized or something like that.
Sure,
there, and that's really special. But the Garden of Gethsemane is interesting too, because they do have trees. Trees are interesting, but you can actually date trees and how old they are.
Yeah.
Stones are different, but you can also do that too. But it is interesting. There are some trees that are a couple thousand years old in that garden with these olive groves or these olive trees.
Beautiful.
Really special.
Yeah.
I remember one, this was a fun thing that we did, was Hezekiah's tunnel. Did you ever do that?
No.
That's when you got to get wet. So the water goes up to your mid-thigh.
Okay.
And I can't remember all the history with it and in the Bible and everything, but King Hezekiah, they built a tunnel, and it wasn't the king, he wasn't doing it, but his men, they built a tunnel.
The king didn't do the manual labor.
Yeah. But I mean, sometimes we just get a skewed idea of what's going on. Yeah. But it's Hezekiah's tunnel. They built this tunnel, and they started at two different ends, and you can see where they meet in the middle. So you're in this tunnel. It's like probably 10 feet tall. It can get a little claustrophobic, but 9-10 feet at places. And then you can see where they meet, and which is crazy how they dug this out of rock, through this tunnel, and there's water in it, and you're walking through it, and it's only like, about this wide, let's say 2 feet or so, 2.5, or I guess maybe 3 feet wide, and you're walking through it, and then you see where they kind of conjoined, and they were about 6 inches off from each other. But I thought that was amazing, and I want to say it's maybe a half a mile. I could be completely wrong with that. It's not like, a 2-hour trip in this dark tunnel,
sure.
But you're taking flashlights, and it's in the middle of the city, in Jerusalem. Yeah. But that was like a fun experience.
Things are so close.
Yeah, everything's close.
Well, and to that point, and I'm going to be a little bit off on my distance as well here, but it seemed like it was within a couple of miles,
Yeah.
there is a Canaanite gate that Abraham went through to go and rescue Lot.
Yeah,
and
that's really old.
That's really old. You know,
That's
and
double the amount of the stuff that's 10 feet down. You know,
that's right.
Yeah,
and so that's just down the road. But you talked about emotion. Maybe one of the more emotional places would have been the Western Wall.
Yes,
and that you know, it's I think probably the thing.
So what is the Western Wall, by the way? So
okay. Well, the Western Wall would have been more of a retaining wall to the temple. The temple
exterior
mount is
wall,
up there,
and it's basically the closest that the Israelis can get, you know, because they have everything sort of quartered off. There's some Muslim or different territories.
You've got the Dome of the Rock up there now that the Israelis are.
But that's the closest you can get.
It's the closest you can get. And by the way, the bottom portion that you can stand up and touch, I've got pictures of touching the Western Wall. That was there during the time of Christ. That was there when the temple was built. You know, so that dates thousands of years to go there. The thing that caught my attention there was how incredibly devoted and committed these Jewish people are that are there. They're there in their
the Orthodox Jews.
Orthodox Jews that are there. Many of them have the
Hasidic,
you know they're not cutting the sideburns, you know, and they're following a lot of the laws from Leviticus and going all the way back to the Old Testament. And they will stand and they'll pray. They've got these Hebrew they've got these Hebrew prayer books of scriptures and prayers, and they'll rock back and forth, and they'll just pray and extremely devoted. And the part that got me about that is you've got these Jews that are so incredibly devoted, but they've missed it. It's an empty religion, very religious without Christ. Right. And I've always wondered how did they miss it? And some of the things that came out this week was they were looking for that political ruler. And when Jesus wasn't going to be the political ruler, there were some of them that were turning to Christ, obviously, during his time. Yeah. But they were looking at Jesus as, well, listen, if you're not going to set up here now, that's the way that they would have interpreted in Isaiah, the government shall be on his shoulders, you know, and he's going to come in and he's going to be saved now, Hosanna. Yeah. And to see the devotion and the expectation of the Messiah. I mean, they believe, hey, the Messiah is true. He's going to be, but he's coming still. He's not here yet. Yeah. And that was an emotional thing.
I think, the Western Wall was one of the coolest experiences. Going there twice, so the second time was really unique. One thing that stood out to me was all the little notes and letters that were crammed in the cracks. Like, you can't, imagine just the joints between the stones, and you couldn't get it any more packed with all these little notes and letters, prayers, things like that. But yes, they're basically the modern day Pharisees, the Orthodox Jews, and not to spite them, but you can see the rituals and what Jesus was confronting was a lot of these traditions. Yes. One thing that was joyful or exciting was I went there the second time was Friday night, and that's the beginning of the Sabbath. Yeah. And it was one of the most joyful times because you have a lot of people. So you have people, Jews that live there all the time. They live in Jerusalem. But then you have tons of Jewish people that are visiting. So, you know, you have Christians, but that is like the exciting time. So they come Friday night, and all these people probably from all over the world, but they're Jewish, to come sort of at like a little pilgrimage, and they were dancing and singing and sort of arm in arm, getting around in a circle and singing songs in Hebrew, and it was like so beautiful, and they were just rejoicing, and you could see the traditions from thousands of years, you know, kind of sort of passed down, and here these people were in front of sort of like a heritage site. It was a cultural moment. It was very beautiful. I have a lot of it on camera and video. It was one of those moments where you take in, and that experience I'll never forget. But that brings up another aspect that I really loved with Israel, and that was the people. I didn't talk to many Jews, and when I say that, I mean religious Jewish people. Yeah, you really don't interact with them much. But the Israelis, those that are just citizens of the country, are very unique people. And when I say that, I mean resilient, just energetic, Any sort of Mediterranean people you're going to meet out there.
Sincere people. Yeah.
So tell me about interactions like that. Like what stood out to you about some of the people that you were able to meet?
Yeah. We had a couple unique experiences, and this would be unique to the Joshua Fund and the connections that Joel Rosenberg has. The first day we went in, we had a humanitarian aid project that right away we get to do. And they kind of held this as a surprise. We knew we were serving somehow, but we didn't know how. So we're going into this church to help serve, do something. And we get there and they tell us we've got 150 or so Holocaust survivors that you're going to be able to meet and you're going to be able to serve. And so they bring them in, they share with them who we are, and we just get to serve them. The church had purchased a bunch of things, kitchen supplies and different things that these people would have needed. And that was a really cool event as well. These obviously were children when this happened, but obviously even as a child, you had parents that were killed in the Holocaust, or they were affected by it, right? I mean, there's no way around living in that time frame and not being affected by it. And so that was a unique thing. We went to a kibbutz. This was last week's podcast. So if someone's not watched last week's, you got to watch last week's because that was the story of October 7th and what took place there. That was a really emotional place. I wept there. Didn't expect that. We're a half mile from the, maybe closer. I mean, we can hear artillery going off. Matter of fact, when we got out of the bus and all of a sudden, boom, you hear these boom, and they tell us, hey, that's us. That's us firing over there right now. And so don't worry. You're going, we are right at a war zone right here, And we get out of the bus, and you're looking at this. You're in the kibbutz. You kind of described it as a neighborhood. That's how I was going to describe it as well. It's a neighborhood, kind of a gated community in a way. Not like it's gated in an upper class.
Yeah, it's not a high class.
It's not that it's high class.
It's just the way they do their communities. Yeah,
yes, it's and socialistic in the way of we pull our resources together.
Because this isn't an ancient idea. Well, the ancient idea of community is one thing, but it was established when the country was formed in the 50s. So So
matter of fact, our tour guide from Israel made comments toward the benefits of socialism in that way.
Right.
And
the Bible teaches it too.
Yeah, right. Well, it was a unique time during that.
It doesn't teach capitalism.
It was a unique time for sure. But that's what they did there, and that's how they operate on that kibbutz. They pull their resources. So it's not like it's an up. You hear gated community. It's not like it's an upper class area. But they've got these homes, and as soon as we get out of the bus, we hear their artillery fire. Mm-hmm. And these homes, nobody's living in these homes because this is the first place that Hamas came over on October 7th. Mm-hmm. They had about 350 to 400 terrorists come into this community of 1,100 or so people. So there's not a lot of people here, about 1,100 or so. So you think about
a bit of a bigger kibbutz.
It's a bigger kibbutz, but think about 350 terrorists coming into a place of only 1,100, 1,200
and
people.
They're not ready.
They're not ready. And so what happened that day, we're standing there, and this survivor is walking us through the homes. Mm-hmm. And every one of these homes is, bullet holes everywhere, shrapnel from grenades everywhere, rocket holes, and the people aren't living in them yet. They've got pictures outside of the people that lived in these places. And he's walking us through these homes. Like, we'll go into the living room and just total destruction. You're walking on rubble. It's been burned. There's bullet holes all over the place. And he would tell us, this is where this family lived, and this is who the dad was, and this is what took place here. All of them have safe rooms, and the government puts the safe rooms in for them. And if you watched last week's, he talked a little bit about this. They would flee to the safe room. They hear the sirens. And on October 7th, they heard the sirens. And so they all went into the safe rooms. And he told us that as they're in the safe rooms, they could hear all of a sudden Arabic outside. They hear people talking and realize there's terrorists here. This is not us.
And usually the safe rooms are more for bomb shelters. Is from
they're
what
built,
I understand.
Well, and he talked about that. So they go in the safe room, and by the way, there's no lock on the safe room door, which to me, they weren't prepared for it that way, right? You're not thinking they're coming in that way. You're thinking of a bomb attack, rockets, right?
Because it's the closest to them. So
yes,
when I was on the kibbutz, like nearly every kibbutz every house has basically just a bomb shelter. So we have storm shelters, same thing. So no need for a lock or anything. It's just a kind of concrete steel door.
Yeah,
that's about
but that blew my mind. And of course, hindsight, I know what happened now, and so I'm thinking, why wouldn't you? Well, they're not thinking of the terrorists coming over in that way. And so he told stories of they would have to have, whether it's the head of the household or whoever the strongest in the family was, a child, if it was an older grandparent living there, whatever, trying to hold the door closed while the terrorists are trying to open it up. Yeah. And they didn't realize at the beginning that they could shoot right through the doors. Again, it was made as a bomb for rockets on the outside. Yeah. And after the first home or two, the terrorists realized they could shoot right through the door. Yeah. And so even the people holding the door, they would shoot them right through the door. Yeah. And if they couldn't get in, and if they didn't get access, they were dousing tires with gasoline. They'd roll them in, and they would just burn the whole place up. And that was a very moving place. And to hear those stories. Very current, and this was my major takeaway, because we went to the Nova Music Festival site after that, where over 300 of them had been murdered. My takeaway that day was, I have been so disconnected from what is going on there. I mean, hey, pray for Israel. I'm pro-Israel. We even talk about voting. Genesis 12. We talk about, hey, we're pro-life, we're pro-family, we're pro-Israel. And Drew, I think one of my biggest takeaways was, I have not kept myself informed enough to really know how to pray, right? I mean, we hear about the hostages. Matter of fact, I think 30-some of that kibbutz, they came in and took them as hostages. They've gotten a few of them back. Many of them, they believe the rest of them probably are dead at this point. They're trying to get their bodies back to be able to give them a proper funeral. But one of my takeaways that week was, we don't have a missionary in Israel, and we've got all of these Jewish people, Orthodox Jews, that are so incredibly religious, but we don't even have a presence there. And you can't, in my opinion, you can, and I'm sure that an American family could do what they could do, but you really need an Israeli there, right? And the Joshua Fund put us together with several of these pastors that are helping these. They're living among them, right? You're not going to convert an Orthodox Jew or an Israeli overnight. It's going to be a relationship. It's going to take some time. Yeah, for sure.
That had to be a sobering moment for sure.
Yeah, it was.
I think a lot of times, I mean, I remember this isn't a great illustration, but just even watching when Russia invaded Ukraine as of late, a few years ago, and how stuff with the technology now, you could watch drones and the tanks coming in, and it's such a awful moment when humans attack other humans, you know, and then when you're there on the ground and you see it, it's just so brutal. And then especially when you feel like it's unprovoked, like there wasn't sort of a in the middle of the road conflict and people started getting in an argument. When you're in your community and then people come in your safe space and then either take you hostage or kill you.
I want to say I'm glad you said that, because one of I would say it was a highlight for sure. I wouldn't put it on the same plane of walking on the same road that Jesus walked on. Okay, that's in a sphere of its own. But one of the really neat highlights was because of the connections with Joel Rosenberg. We had a small sit-down private meeting, off-the-record meeting, with the president of Israel, Isaac Herzog, at his private residence. And we got to go in. They sat us around kind of in a horseshoe. He sat up front with facing all of us with Joel Rosenberg and Chad Conley, the two leaders of our group. And in that discussion, we're just kind of having a little discussion. He's telling us he understands it's American pastors and we have an audience and we're praying, but we've got people that we can communicate a message to also. and he's communicating to us. He said this. He said that Hamas is actually sending billions of dollars into the U.S. right now to the universities, and the universities are teaching a pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas ideology. And that's part of the reason we have so many young people right now, because you just said it. It was unprovoked, right? I mean, Israel, they didn't want this. They're in a ceasefire with them. And all of a sudden, this attack happens. By the way, a couple of things were interesting. They said that they found on the bodies of these Hamas members. And do you remember seeing the footage? Hamas, they would have the cameras on.
Yeah,
Remember, they're coming in paragliders. They found on the bodies of these Hamas members, they had plans to get much further into the cities. They came across unexpectedly the Nova Music Festival. So here's like 3,000 or 4,000 people. They didn't expect to come up upon that. So they come over the ridge, and in their mind, I think it's like gold mine. I mean, look at all these people. They say that actually saved hundreds and thousands of lives, because the plan was for them to go deep into the city. They had shovels, they had food, they were going to trench in and cause. And the other side of it was Hezbollah from the north was supposed to be coming into on the other side. And so you were going to have these two. Hezbollah didn't show up. They didn't do what they were expecting them to do. It could have been a worse situation.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, it's such. Every time I hear, it's a heavy topic, and I know we watched it the last episode for sure. I'm sure that was probably the most, emotionally impactful in terms of like right there. It's a current event that had to be. See, that's what's so interesting about Israel is you're getting, you have pre the time of Jesus and the disciples. So Abraham, as you mentioned, you've got that history, like David and Goliath, the Valley of Elah. You've got that stuff. Then you've got the time of Jesus. Then you've got the time even of Paul. And then you have the more recent history, too, of the nation of Israel being born and kind of forming together and all of that stuff, like the military stuff. It's very unique to see how they, it's not unusual to go to McDonald's and to see an Israeli military serviceman or woman with, AK-47, something.
No.
And they're
all over.
Eating their Big Mac.
Yes.
And it's all
Yes.
over. Everyone's required to go into the military. Once you're 18, you do your service. It's a really unique country.
Yeah.
One thing, okay, what did you do? Oh, you were there on a Sunday, right? What did you guys do Sunday?
Sunday,
like for worship, did you have a?
Yeah.
Did you?
Every day we had messages, right? So we had a message every day. There were things like that. We would travel to sites. We'd be talking. 6 of the pastors would give messages at different places. I don't remember which day Sunday was.
Well,
now.
did you go to a Messianic church?
No.
Okay.
No.
So the last thing I wanted to share
Yeah.
was how amazing that was. So again, I was not as struck by the places. Now it's so cool just to be, all the history is just beautiful. The architecture, the stones, it's so cool. I just wasn't as struck emotionally, like this was the road. This was as much as going on a Sunday morning in a church in Jerusalem, literally in an upper room, no cell phones allowed. This is crazy. I mean, it wasn't super secretive, but you're not allowed to bring your cell phone. You go up into this room, there's about 150 people there, and they do church. There's a pastor, there's a musician, they sing, they read the word, and it's a little bit different format, but it's just like church at Castleview, but in an upper room with plastic chairs, they have a little fellowship afterwards, but they're Jewish, they speak Hebrew, and then they would translate in English, and they had a different, how we have an order of service where you get up during the offering time, you welcome and greet people. Well, they have a segment that was in their service that was about how to share your faith with your Jewish friends, and it was very specific, where they would take a portion of the Torah and they would say, this is what they're reading today, because they have like sort of a different part of the Torah they go through.
Sure.
And say, this is what they're reading. Here's how you can share your faith with this passage.
Yeah.
And it was very down to earth, very like you're just jumping in. It wasn't a special service. It's just their normal Sunday.
Yeah.
And I think the most beautiful part of that service too was the music. So they would sing in Hebrew some of the familiar songs that the worship songs that we sing today in Hebrew. And it was so beautiful to think that you're sitting there a couple thousand years later and the story still lives on. The story of Jesus still lives on. And it's kind of special. It's just really cool. Yeah. I think that was probably the most beautiful moment. And I wasn't able to capture it because the video,
no cell phones,
the camera.
And I think cool. I think that was one of the big takeaways too, is there's an urgency, there's a sincerity to their faith. I mean, if you've got these born again Jews, they are standing in opposition. There's a conflict.
It's not easy
there.
to be a Messianic Jew.
It's not
Israel.
easy. No, we talk about we don't understand baptism here, right? I mean, baptism's a celebration, which it is, but baptism doesn't mean, it does mean the same thing. That there's not
with the cultural identity, it's a lot different.
There's not the turning away from family and friends generally here in the United States, right? We don't experience that, but you experience that there. It was the people, you had Nicodemus coming to Jesus by night, right? Because he's going, hey, I think there's something different about this one, but I can't let anybody know about this. I mean, I got to do it under the cover of it. It really did impress upon my heart the need for us to pray for Israel, pray for the peace of Jerusalem, pray for these hostages that are there, pray for the safety of these people, pray for these Orthodox Jews that need to understand that the Messiah has already come.
Right.
So it was very impactful. So impactful that I just kept thinking the whole church has to experience this. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, so tell me about that, because I think there may be a trip upcoming.
Yeah.
I don't know much of the details, so share something like that with me.
Me neither. But I announced it with confidence on Sunday, didn't I, that in 27 we're going to do this. Well, I kind of announced it. We're going to work backwards now and figure out exactly.
27?
27. Okay. I think next year may be a little bit early for some, but we're going to plan a trip, I think, for 27.
Okay.
So that, I talked to several people on Sunday when I mentioned it. They're going, that actually is perfect. That gives us time to save, because it's a big investment. It's not going to be the cheapest trip that we have.
The world there.
Right.
It's a long ways.
And I'm going to encourage people, listen, you can have teenagers that come on a trip like that. They can experience it and see it and be changed by it. And so we'll start working that direction for a 27 trip. Don't even know the time of year yet and all of that.
And it probably, to help people understand this, it probably will be guided by like another team of people.
Yes.
So it's not that you're the travel agent here.
No. Listen, and by no means, obviously, on one trip am I the Israel expert. You know what I mean? It was like drinking out of a fire hydrant at every stop, right? Because there's so much information. And you're taking all of this information that you've read about the Bible for all these narratives, all these stories, and all of a sudden these independent things in your brain are locking in together.
Yeah.
It's really cool. So I actually talked to the tour guide that we had used, and I've got other friends that do it. We'll get somebody that is an expert on this area, but it'll be a life-changing trip, and I'd encourage anybody to make their plans to be able to go and do it for sure.
So sign up.
Sign up.
You got this.
Yeah, that's right. So it was a cool thing. I'll never forget it. It was a neat experience. I will also say this, and we'll be done. I had a chance when we were at that in the president's private residence there. He talked for a few minutes, and then he said, "Okay, I want to hear from these pastors," and so Chad Connolly took charge, and first thing he says is, Tate, why don't you tell him, what your experience was going on that kibbutz and what you felt emotionally and what that was like.
Put on the spot.
And so they hand me a mic, and I'm looking right at the president of Israel. And by the way, what other president do you want to meet in the world outside of the U.S. president? It would be pretty cool for us. Well, the Israeli president, that's pretty cool because of our history and our belief system and all of that. And so I will say to the church, I did let him know that our church would be praying more in earnest for him and for Israel and for the peace of Jerusalem. And so that's a commitment that I want to make too. The Bible commands us to do this. And Genesis chapter 3, I mean, you bless them, God's going to bless you as well. By the way, you said unprovoked attack a little while ago, this whole shape of this conflict they have there. Joshua was told, hey, every place that your foot falls here in this land, that's yours. I give that to you. That's their land, right? It was taken from them. That's their land. They've taken it back, and now they're just defending the place that God has already given them in the first place. But fascinating trip, amazing trip. All I could think of was we got to do this as a church here pretty soon and experience.
2027. Mark
2027. Mark it on your calendar. Hey, Cassidy, thank you for just kind of joining this little conversation. It could have been a lot longer. There could have been a lot of things we went into. But you just got to get your calendar marked down for at least kind of holding your brain at this point. Hey, sometime in 27, we're going to make a trip, and I'd love for you to really try and make that happen. And let's do this. Let's really pray for Israel, and let's pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and pray for these Jews that are so religious and so devoted, but so lost when it comes to Jesus and him being the Messiah. Hey, thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. We'll see you again next week.